Almost 10 years ago, I briefly dated this guy that I met on a dating app. For this story, I'm just going to call him Joe. Based on appearance and his bio, I swiped right on him and we ended up matching. Then he started a conversation with me soon after. I really didn't know much about the guy, but after talking for a couple of days, he asked me to go on a date. Long story short, he seemed like a good guy and was funny. Within a few weeks, we had started dating. Looking back, everything happened pretty fast, and it seems like maybe we rushed into things, because not too long after this, I realized that Joe had a bad temper and also a drinking problem. He would always pick fights and never wanted me to go any place without him. I found that to be controlling, and when we met, he was not like this, and wasn't really like that for the first couple of months of knowing him either. In those times, he was mostly fine, but it only seemed to get worse and worse. The relationship only lasted for about 3 months, and then I had to break up with him. I also found out that he had been talking to other women at around the same time. He didn't take the breakup very well, but I didn't even care anymore. He yelled at me and cursed me out and called me a bunch of names, but I just left. So after the breakup, we deleted each other off Facebook and didn't communicate at all. We lived on opposite sides of the city, which is fairly large, so I never saw him either. I had moved on and mostly forgot about him, when about 6 months later he texted me out of nowhere. He just said hi, and at first I didn't respond. Then he sent me a friend request on Facebook again, and he also sent me a message there. I was not at all interested in getting back with him, but I was just curious as to why he was texting me out of nowhere seemingly, so I ended up responding to his text a couple of days later. When I said hi, he texted back very quickly. He asked me how I was doing, but then he asked me to see him again. I told him no. He then cursed me out yet again. When he did this, I blocked his number. But after that, he started to send me a bunch of messages on Facebook, which caused me to block him there as well. I blocked him on every social media that I could find, and just hoped that he would leave me alone. Well, a couple of days after that, he showed up at my apartment. I was at home by myself and in the living room. There was a knock on the door, and I didn't know who it could be. It was not late at night or anything, but just the afternoon. It could have been a neighbor or maybe a friend just stopping by, so I walked over and opened up the door without giving it much thought. It was Joe standing there right outside the door. He obviously knew where I lived from when we had dated. I was really surprised, but also uncomfortable to see him there. He asked to come in, and I asked him what he wanted. Joe claimed that he wanted to talk. I said that we could do all the talking right here, and I didn't want him to come inside. Joe then told me that he wanted to see me again and asked to hang out. I said no. This set him off, and he once again started cursing at me, calling me names and such. I told him this is the exact reason why we had broken up. His short temper was unbearable. I tried slamming the door in his face, but he grabbed it and stopped it from closing. Then he started to enter my apartment. He ignored me, shouting at him to leave several times. I ran to the back of the room and grabbed the phone. I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave, and this finally got him to go away. After yelling more bad words at me, he finally left my place. I was glad that he was gone, but now worried about him showing up again. I considered trying to get a restraining order or something, but ultimately that day I did not do that. I just hoped that he would get the message once and for all and leave me alone for good. At that point, I thought that I wouldn't see him again, but I was wrong. That very same night, I was awoken in the middle of the night to a random sound. At first, I didn't know what it was because I had been sleeping and was not fully awake. But when I heard it again, I realized that it was coming from the window in the living room. My apartment was on the first floor of the building and on the back side of it. It faced a parking lot and some woods, so I instantly was afraid that somebody was trying to break in. I got up from my bed and carefully went out into the living room. The first thing that I saw was a man on the other side of the window. He was actually wearing a mask that covered his face, but he strongly resembled Joe. And who else would it really be? He was messing around at the window, seemingly trying to get inside. Thankfully, I don't think that he saw me. I quickly ran back into my bedroom and closed and locked the door. Then I called the police. I stayed hidden in my room while I waited, and the response from the police was really fast. They were there within 2 or 3 minutes. Thankfully, Joe had not gotten inside yet. Police found him and he was caught trying to break in. It was in fact Joe, and after that I did get a restraining order against him. I haven't seen him since that night. and I'm hoping that I never do again. I have a creepy story about an ex-girlfriend that I had. Her name was Megan. We first met back when we both worked at the same place. I actually asked her out first because I found her attractive. After a couple of months of going out, we started officially dating. Now, I will say that I didn't know her all that well. This was a while ago now, and I was in my early 20s, as was she. I lived with a roommate in an apartment, and Megan had her own apartment a few miles away. Megan told me that she was not from the state that we lived in, and from elsewhere. She said her family was back where she was from, so I never got to meet her parents or anything. It's weird because we got to know each other so well while we were dating, but I also feel like I didn't really know that much about her. When we hung out, we would do all the regular things that couples do. Watch movies and shows together, cook together, go on dates places, and stuff like that. I was taking a gap year from college during this time while I saved up money to go for my master's degree. I know that Megan had briefly gone to college in another state, and she said that she had moved just to get away from things and look for work. So after we dated for like 3 or 4 months, I stopped seeing her as much. She was not at work, and I wondered why. The company that we worked at was pretty large. We would not always see each other every day, and after we started dating, we wouldn't try to talk at work quite as much because we would hang out after. So the first few days, I didn't think much of it, but after I asked her to hang out and stuff, she started saying that she was busy and couldn't. She did hang out with me a couple of times that week, I think just 2 or 3 though, and usually we'd hang out almost every day. Then she told me that she had quit the job, saying that she hated working there other than seeing me. I knew she didn't like it much, so this didn't raise a huge red flag yet. But then, she randomly broke up with me. She told me over text that she had to break up with me because she was going to be moving away to continue her college career. I called her and briefly talked to her about it. I asked to meet up, but she said no. She said that she was sorry, but she did not want to do a long-distance relationship. I even offered to move to wherever she was going, but she still said no. I was sad, but something about it felt like this was for the best. So ultimately, I said okay, and then she hung up on me. Now, this is where things get really weird. We had broken up on pretty good terms as far as I was aware of. I tried to move on with my life and stop thinking about her, and I did surprisingly well, but a couple of weeks after the breakup, some weird things happened. I remember that I got off of work one day and was leaving to go to my car in the parking lot. It was a huge parking lot and always had a bunch of cars scattered around. When I got inside of my vehicle, I happened to notice a car parked a ways away. There was this woman behind the wheel who looked just like Megan, and I was sure that it was her, but she now had a different hair color and completely different hairstyle as well. She was also in a car that she did not drive when we dated. She appeared to be alone in the car, and I was about to get out and walk over to her until I thought that maybe it wasn't her. We were kind of far away and I didn't have a really great look at her. But as I continued to look in her direction, she put on sunglasses, making it even harder to tell for sure. I was very confused. I kept looking in her direction, and I noticed her looking back at me. When that happened, I remembered that she suddenly drove away. I was really confused by this whole thing. When I got home from work, I decided to go on her social media to see if I could find anything out about her, but it was all gone. I had been following her on Instagram, been friends with her on Facebook, and also friends on Snapchat. Plus, I had her number, obviously. I couldn't find her in any of those places. When I tried texting her number, it didn't go through. Either she had blocked me or deleted her accounts. I asked a friend to try to find her online just because I was curious if I had been blocked or not, but he couldn't find her either. This added to the strangeness. Then, a few days later, I was randomly followed home by this guy. I left work as usual, and this one car followed me almost the entire way home. There was a man behind the wheel, I could tell that, but he was wearing sunglasses and a dark-colored sweatshirt as well as a baseball cap, so I couldn't give a good description of his appearance, and it was a different car as the one that I had seemingly seen my ex driving a few days prior. I didn't really pay much attention to him following me until I was almost the whole way back home. I had realized that he was behind me for a while, and I didn't know why. So when I was maybe 2 or 3 minutes from my house, I turned at this random spot, and so did the guy behind me. I then turned again, and he did too. This confirmed to me that he was in fact following me. I started to pull over, and at first the car behind me did as well. But then it randomly stopped pulling over and just drove right past me. It was like he realized that I knew he was following me and he decided to leave. After that, I went home. And after that day, I didn't notice anything else strange happening. I never heard from Megan again. I tried looking her up again recently, but still couldn't find anything. It's all very strange. For some background to this story, I'm a female and now an adult. When I was a freshman in high school about 10 years ago, social media was still sort of new. This is really embarrassing for me to admit, but I remember that I had this internet boyfriend for a short time. I had never dated anybody before, and when I first got a Snapchat and a Facebook and also a smartphone, I was meeting new people online, mostly around my age thankfully. But I started talking to this one guy and we soon became boyfriend and girlfriend. We actually did live in the same state, but not the same city, and we're over an hour away. It's crazy to look back on now, because we never even met each other in person. I think we both just wanted to know what it was like to be in a relationship. We would Snapchat all day and stuff. The guy's name was Derek, and I really don't know much about him other than that, and we were the same age and grade. He was a typical guy for the most part, and we probably knew each other for less than a week before we started dating. I wouldn't even count this as an actual relationship that I've been in, because it was so short and only online. So the whole thing didn't last very long. I don't even remember exactly how or why we broke up. I just remember that we broke up probably 2 or 3 weeks after dating. We had brief conversations for maybe a few more weeks after, but for the most part we stopped contacting each other, and before long we deleted each other on Snapchat and Facebook. Randomly, like a year later though, he sent me a friend request again, but I ignored it. I didn't bother to accept or decline it. I just completely ignored it. He did the same thing on Snapchat, and I did the same thing there as well. Pretty quickly, I forgot all about him. I was in high school and I made lots of new friends. Well, when I was a junior in high school, I saw him again. I remember that out of nowhere, I got this notification on Facebook that Derek was trying to say we were in a relationship. I thought this was really weird, but I didn't send him a message or anything. I really didn't want to talk to him. However, I declined the Facebook thing of us being in a relationship. Well, the next day, I went to school like any other. I got there a little while before classes started. Out of nowhere, this guy approached me in the hallways. It was Derek. This was literally the first time that I had ever seen him in person. I didn't even really recognize him at first until he told me who he was. I asked him what he was doing at my school. He asked me to go with him and leave the school. He said that he drove there and we could go back to his place or something. I was not interested. I said no, I had classes to attend, and I had to go now or I would be late. He got more demanding, saying that I had to go with him. He even grabbed my wrist. I pulled away from him though, and he let go of me. I started walking away, and he followed me all the way until my classroom and then stopped. I was happy to see that he did not enter the room. Class soon started. Not long after, the school went into a lockdown. I realized that it was probably because of Derek, and he was probably still in the school. The lockdown lasted for about 30 minutes and then was lifted. Sure enough, Derek was the cause of it. I guess he was seen walking the hallways and ran away from a hall monitor. Somebody else saw him and questioned him, but he refused to say who he was. After shoving another faculty member who also questioned him, the school was locked down. He tried leaving, but the police were called and they caught up with him. Apparently, he was a troubled young man and had been expelled from his own high school. I'm not sure why. What I don't know is why he randomly showed up at my school and wanted me to go with him. It had been so long. I'm glad that I've not seen him since then though. Back in the late 90s, I dated this woman for a while. The relationship did not last long, and we broke up because we had many differences. She was actually the one to initiate the breakup, but I wasn't even that upset about it. Things had not been going well for a while from what I remember. So after breaking up, I remember finding out that she was dating a new guy like less than a month later. I was sort of surprised by this, but I tried not to pay any attention to her anymore. At the time, I lived by myself in a sort of small house a little ways outside of the city. One night, I was fast asleep when suddenly a noise woke me up. I didn't know what it was at first, but I then realized that somebody was banging on my front door. I looked at the clock and it was almost 2 a.m. I got up and walked out into the living room to go and see who was at my door at this hour, but the knocking stopped before I got there. When I looked out of the window, I didn't see anybody at the door anymore, but I then saw what appeared to be my ex walking through the front yard. I was very confused. She went out of my sight, and I did not think that she noticed me at the window. I kept looking, and I didn't see her for a while, so after that, I decided to go back to bed. I went back into my room, laid down, and closed my eyes. Before falling asleep, though, I heard another very loud noise. This time, though, it was the crashing of glass. It was so loud, and I will never forget it. I had no idea what was going on. This continued as if somebody was intentionally smashing my windows in the living room. Luckily, I had a telephone in my bedroom at the time, and I dialed 911. I reported what was going on, and I continued hearing the smashing for at least a minute straight. Then, it finally stopped, and I heard my ex shouting from a distance, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. She soon stopped, though. I walked back out into the living room to find the window smashed and glass on the ground, but I didn't see anybody. The police got there a while later, and my ex was gone by then. I told them about what happened. They later found my ex walking alone on a nearby street, and she was arrested. It turns out that she was very drunk and had been at a bar. Her friend was going to drive her home, but for some reason, she asked to be dropped off at my place. That must have been when she banged on my door. Then she went and got a long metal pipe type of object that was in my neighbor's yard. She used that to then smash my windows before leaving. I'm not sure why she did this other than from just being drunk, because we had been broken up for a while and she was dating somebody else already. I got my window replaced and moved on with my life, but I'll never forget that crazy experience.